Hi, this is Kevin Trainer. Welcome to my tutorial for the controller assignment uh, for the Easy University case. And this is associated with Chapter 5 in the Pinkham book, Django Unleashed. Um, it, there's going to be a real contrast here in the approach that we take during our tutorial and project to what the approach that Pinkham takes in Chapter 5. Because in Chapter 5, Pinkham does a really nice job. He's talking about the components in Django that make up the controller portion of the classic model view controller architecture. And those are the urls.py and the views.py. And he doesn't just show us a single version of how to do it. He begins with kind of the versions that we were using at the end of our last tutorial. And he makes them more complex, more functional, and then he begins to introduce shortcuts. So by the end of the chapter, we have a much more tight, abbreviated code. That's great. And it's also good that we saw how we got there. So if we're ever kind of wondering about what's happening kind of under the covers of this abbreviated code, we can go back to chapter 5 and say, before we simplified this without all the shortcuts, what all were we doing here? So in our tutorial, we're just going to go right to the shortcuts. Okay, so we're going to try our best to just do one version of everything we do within the chapter. Okay? I am beginning with the published solution that I have for the last of the tutorials, the template tutorial for Easy University. And typically I publish that. And if you want to start there or you want to copy some files from it, feel free to do it. I certainly have done that myself. So I've got the right version that I want. I just want to make sure that this is the version, the working version that I think. So I'm gonna run the manage Pi task, and I'm going to start the server. And I just want to see what functionality we have. And as you can see, because we haven't linked up the home page, okay, we currently have a bunch of URLs that we're looking for. We have the admin URL to go to the administrative tools, and then we have an instructor list URL, a section list, a course list, a semester list, a student list. So we have all those. So let's just test the last one to make sure that we have everything installed. So if we type in student, we get the student list. And you may notice that I have a lot more data, or some more data here than I had in the last tutorial, because I have copied over the db.sqlite3 file from my solution. And when I put the solution together for the template assignment, I created some more data. Okay, so you, by copying that file out of my solution, can put yourself into the same spot. Okay, so okay, the state of the world is as we want it. So let's start thinking about what we're going to do. Well, one of the things that happens within Chapter 5 is we take the not the models, we take the views, okay, and again, it's the views.py and the urls.py in Django that make up the controller portion of a classic model view controller architecture. And that's why we call this the controller assignment. So let's go to views. And what we have is we have a view for each of the requests that we think we're going to get in from the browser. We have an instructor list view, a section list view, and on. And I did a couple of those for you, and you did the rest on your own. Okay, and so now when you look, they should all be there, all the way down to the student list view. And then if we look at the URLs, and we're currently using the URLs for the overall project. Okay, and if you look at that, we've got again we're catching the URL pattern for the admin function, and then we're catching the one that we're using for instructor list, section list, course list, etc. Okay, so one of the things covered in chapter 5 that I'd like to do is I'd like to do a more sophisticated version of the URLs framework. And more sophisticated in the following sense, we typically have a urls.py for every app that we have, not just one for all the apps. And so what we need to do is we need to clone this urls.py and put the cloned version, the copied version, into the course info app, which we're going to do with this paste. And it's going to be called urls.py. Okay. And I'm just going to tell it that I always want to put these things under version control. So that's going to work fine. Okay, and of course we are looking at that. So we have the import up front, and we have this. And what we're going to want to do here is we are going to want to do the urls.py in a more useful way. Okay, so I just want to put you on pause for a second, and I'll be right back. Okay, I needed to spin up my solution to the end of this tutorial to see all the code that I created. Okay, so we've got two versions of course info. We have two versions of urls.py. We've got the top level one that's in Easy University. That's the one for the whole project. Okay, and that's going to be more abbreviated than it was before. Okay, so let's see what we can do there. So we are going to do the following thing. We're going to not do the routing for all of our individual URLs that are related to the course info. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to copy this one that sends into admin. Okay. And we're going to have the same kind of forwarding kind of approach. Instead of forwarding it to the URLs for admin, what we're going to do is we're going to say if we don't match admin, okay, then we're going to forward it to the URLs in the course info app. Okay. And what does that look like? Well, that looks like this. We're going to say that we want to include, so we take the same kind of approach. And we're going to call this course info URLs. Okay. Now you may say, oh, well, it doesn't see course info URLs. Well, that's okay. We don't have to import all these views anymore because we're not forwarding to the views. But we do have to do an import so we can find the course info URLs. And because of the fact that you often have more than one app, okay, you would have a forward line here for each of your apps, okay? In which case, you would not want to say that you want to forward to urls.py. That's not going to work very well. So here's what we do. We say from course info, import URLs, just all by itself, as, and we give it an alias, course info underscore URLs. And now import URLs as course info URLs. So even though this wasn't a name that we recognized previously, we were able to map it to the urls.py in the course info app. All right, and that's all we have to do. That one's done. So let's go over to the other one, course info URLs. Okay, and are we going to need to map the other one in quite the same way? And it's going to be similar, but not all that different. Okay, so we're not going to need the following thing. We're not going to need the routing for admin because we've already picked off the routing for admin. Okay, but we are going to need the routing for instructor, section, course, semester, student. Okay. So are we going to have to import admin? No, we're not going to have to do that because because that's already taken care of in the other URLs at the project level. And this should probably do it. Okay. So that looks good. So what have we done? Well, what I would call this is a refactoring. Okay, we changed the structure of the code to make it more maintainable and robust. Okay, but we didn't want to change the functionality. Okay, so if we did it the right way, we ought to be able to run our tests. Just go back to the development server here. We ought to be able to run our tests, and it ought to be able to work the same way. So let's type in the URL for admin. Well, that goes to the same place it used to. That's good. And let's do the first of these. Let's do the instructor list, which we do with the URL instructor. And that seems to work fine. Okay. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to go to the last one, which is the student list, and put in the URL for that, and we get the student list. Okay, so we've refactored to a more sophisticated um, design for URL configuration and forwarding. And we're able to run our tests, and the code looks pretty good. All right. Now, what's the next thing that we're going to do? Well, over the course of the chapter, Pinkham goes through several versions of the code for the view. So let's look at the code we have for the views right now. Okay, and in fact, we've got a pretty long code here for the view. Okay, and Pinkham does this in about 3 or 4 steps. First, he introduces one set of shortcuts. So the code sort of up in the top of this code block gets shorter and more concise. And then eventually he introduces another set of shortcuts, and it gets even more concise. And so he puts us in the position where we still have a function-based view. This is a function. So instructor-list view is a function. But it's much more compact. And then he goes on and he introduces the idea, well, there are class-based views, and they have a lot of advantages. And he confesses that he uses class-based views. So I've decided that we're going to use class-based views. So what would a class-based view for this first one look like? Well, let's take a look. Okay, so what I typically do here is the following. I typically copy the code that I have. Okay, and maybe I'll show you some of the changing steps that he has. No, I don't think I am. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put that into a comment. I don't want to get rid of it until we have replaced it with a class-based view. So I'm going to put in a couple of blank lines, and instead of saying that I want to put in the definition of a function, I want to declare a class instructor list. Okay, and instructor list is a subclass of the view class. Okay, and you know what's not working is it can't find that class because we don't have the import. And I don't know if I showed you this before, but a really useful thing that you can do when you need to do an import is to highlight the term that you need to do the import for, and then you click on an alt enter, alt return. Okay, which on the Mac is option return. Well, it also says alt. So, and we say import this name. Okay, and it says okay. There are 2 packages that we can get it from: Django Views or Django Views Generic. And we don't want the generic. We just want the plain views. So click on that, and we've resolved that. Okay, so highlight the name of the class or the method or the function. Okay, and then press Alt Return, and then you get into that dialog where you can do the import without having to get yourself up there and type it in. Okay, So we've got one method in our class, and it's get. Okay, and the arguments is getting our self, the request. So that's the request is the same that we got before. Okay, so those are the two arguments. Why does it get the self? Well, because this is a method that's inside of a class. It gets the self reference, whereas the approach that we had before, it was a function that was not inside of a class. Okay. So first of all, we're going to get the list of instructors. Okay. I'm sorry. Uh, we're not. So how are we going to do this? Well, we're just going to type return, and we're going to return render. We're going to call render. We're going to pass it a bunch of arguments. And what arguments are we going to pass it? Well, the request that came in from the browser. We're going to need that. We're going to pass it the reference to the template that we want to use. So course info / instructor list. Okay. And last, we want to build a context, okay, which is again a dictionary. And here, we're only going to pass what we were passing in the other version, which is an instructor list. So we have instructor list is the name that it's going to be known by, and instructor list is the name of the variable that holds the structure that we want to put in there. I just you know what? We have another shortcut here. Oh, excuse that. We're just going to build the instructor list right on the fly here. So we're going to say instructor objects all. Okay. So how did we get the list of instructors the last time? Well, instructors objects all. How did we point to the template the last time? Well, we had an argument that we had for that. Okay. Did we pass the request through before? Well, we didn't do it explicitly, but it's we used it up in here when we did the render. Okay, so this is improved in 3 or 4 different ways, but it's a class-based view. Okay, it has a method for each method from the HTTP communication protocol. So it turns out that when we click on a link on an HTML page, just a plain old anchor tag, a link, the method that gets used, the method that gets sent by the browser in the request is a get. So we're saying, oh, if we have the right URL, in which case it said instructor / and if it's a get, which is going to be because we're going to be coming from a link and that's going to cause get, then this is the code for that. And we're essentially doing the same things that we were doing up in the function-based view in a much more compact and programmer-friendly way. And if you want to see all the steps in between, well, then feel free to read chapter 5. Okay. So this is a refactor. Okay. Now, can we continue to point to it this way? No, we can't. All right, so let's go up to URLs, and now we only have to work with the URLs in, sorry, we only have to work with the URLs that are here, okay? And then let's say, okay, we can't point to instructor list view because we don't have anything that's called that anymore. Okay, well, what's it called? Well, it's a class that's called instructor list, and we want to treat it as a view. So how could we do that? Well, if we go up to URLs, we can add the following language. Okay, we can, and here's where I'd like to put each of these on their own. I like to start to separate these out by a blank line. So we're going to say we have a URL, and the URL is instructor. Okay, and then we need to point to the instructor list view, and then we're going to add one more improvement down here, and that's going to be it. So how do we point to the instructor list view? Well, we're going to do this. We're going to use the name of the class. So we're going to say instructor list, instructor list dot as view. Okay. Well, that's not working. That's not working because we don't have a proper import. So let's just say that we want to import instructor list, which is the name of a class, from courseinfo.views.py, and now that resolves. Now we have a third argument here, and this is just getting ready for the kind of things that we're going to do after we do chapter 6, and that is we're going to start to use this urls.py to do more than simply route the request. Okay, in the current tutorial, we're going to learn just about everything that we need to learn about how to route requests on the basis of the characters doing this in the URL. But the other thing that URL patterns are used for is they're really good helpers when you're trying to build the URLs to link the pages back to each other. So far we have not populated the href attributes in all of the links. And when we go to do that, it's going to be really helpful for us to be able to point to this URL pattern. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start to add this. Sorry, that's not what I meant. We're going to start to add, we're going to say name equals. So this is a named parameter. And we're going to include the name of the app, course info, and the name of the view, instructor list. And a convention that I use that Pinkham does not use is I don't want to confuse this with something else called an instructor list, like the template or the view. This is the URL pattern. So I just put at the end URL pattern, all one word. Okay, and I find that pretty nice. And we don't need a comma after that, so we should be just fine. So we refactored this. Okay, we had to change the URL pattern to reference the class-based view. While we were at it, we added this name that we're not really going to use until we get to the next chapter. Okay, and that's okay. We'll test it then. I always say you don't want to add things you don't want to test, but as long as we're here, we're going to do this. And then again, on the views, we greatly simplified the logic um, in the view, and then we refactored it to put it inside of the get method of the instructor list class. So if we save this, let's just go back and prove to ourselves that we have code that still works. So let's say instructor, and we blew something. As view takes one positional argument, but they were giving two. So there'll be a slight pause while I fix this. Okay, found it. So in the URL pattern, to refer to the view, I used the name in the instructor list class. That's fine. And then I called the asView method on it. But I took the auto completion and it didn't give me the parens to make it a proper method call. And that's all that we had that was causing the problem. Okay, so you want to make sure that if you're using auto completion that you get the parens. All right, so now we save that. And we're going to come back here and test it again. And it works just fine. Okay, and then let's just let's go and clean up the views. Okay, because we have some dead code. You don't want. I think it's clearly okay to leave some code here to refer to while you're doing a refactor, but you don't want to leave it in really any longer than that. Okay, and there should be 2 blank lines. And are there? Yeah, there are 2 blank lines. And let's just give that another save, and we'll be done. So come back here, test it again, instructor, and there's your instructor list. Okay, so we have refactored one of the views. We have this instructor list, and that's all refactored to use the ClassBased View and the upgraded urls.py code. And now what we need to do is we need to do this for sections, courses, semesters, and students. Okay, so how are you going to do that? Well, you're just going to go view by view, and you're going to do what we just did. Okay, so I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to let you do it, so you don't have to watch me do it. And then when you start this up again, you will see me getting to the very end of those changes. Okay, I'll just have done the refactoring to give a class-based view and the more modern coding for I'll have done the section, the course, the semester, and I'll just be finishing up the student. So off you go and do those on your own. See you soon. Well, hello and welcome back. So we took a pause there so you could take the changes that we made in urls.py and views.py for the instructor list, and to refactor the rest of these model classes in the same way. So we should have a section list, a course list, a semester list, and a student list at this point. And luckily for me, I was able to copy mine from my already baked version of this project. You had to do that work right now. So when we finish, our changes to the URL list, we have refactored all of these things using the same kind of pattern that we use for the instructor list. Okay, so the string that we're using in the URL expression is the same as it was in the prior version. The expression that we're using to point to the list is different because, to point to the view, because we're using class-based views and we refer to them a different way. So we say, for instance, section list at dot as view. And as we learned a little while ago, we need the parens on the method call for as view. And then we need to concoct a name for this URL pattern. This whole entry is referred to in the Django world as a URL pattern. This first part is referred to as a regular expression pattern, this one here, but the entirety is a URL pattern. And so we're going to use the same kind of naming convention for these that we used for the instructor list. So that's what we did here, and if you go to views, you should have made changes to views. And so now the view for section list, course list, semester list, and student list are all class-based and simplified. Okay, so it's much prettier and easy to work with. All right. Note also that when we do this simplification, I think two of the import lines we had at the top, they grayed out because we weren't using them anymore. So remember to check the imports that you no longer need. And why do we no longer need them? Well, it turns out that the shortcut that we're using is what is going to call those pieces of infrastructure that we were calling explicitly here. So the imports for those are in the code that's coming from the shortcuts. Okay? So it's not like it's not getting done. It's just not getting done here. All right, and just to prove that I got this whole thing working, I'm going to find my browser, and I'm just going to show that, for instance, the student list view is working just fine. All right, good. So, where do we go from here? Well, we have all of the lists. Okay, when we get done for all of these tables that we have in the database, or we could call them entities if we were talking more of a data modeling point of view, or if we want to use Django terms, they're model classes. Okay, those things are all pretty much have a one-to-one correspondence with each other. Okay, so far we have a list view for each of those and a template to match. Now we're going to have a detail view for each of those and a template to match. And then later on, past this assignment, we're going to have yet other views that are going to allow us to do things like enter data and update and delete, add, change, and delete. So, but we're not there yet, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the the instructor table, model class, etc., and build a detail template and a detail view and create a URL pattern to route it. Okay? So I'm going to start with the URL pattern because it's kind of at the beginning of the workflow, right? So we have a request that comes in from the browser. It gets to our Django server, and it comes into our URL router code. And our URL router code is going to ask the question, well, what view should I pass it to? Okay. Now, what the question that comes up, and I think it's discussed reasonably well in Chapter 5 of Pinkham, is how are we going to construct the URL? So this URL scheme is part of the API for our app. Okay, it's a web API, application programming interface. Okay, and so it's the language with which we make requests of our app. And so far, we've learned that if we just give it the string admin, that will be taken to the admin app, and then instructor, section, course, semester, and student will be taken for the list for each of those. So then how do we ask for the detail page for a particular instructor or section or course? Well, what we're going to do here is we're just going to use the primary key. So for the instructor, we're going to use the instructor number, which is or the instructor ID, which is the primary key for that table. And we're going to expect that to be passed in like so. So let's, let me just cheat a little bit and bring up my URL here. And I'm just going to copy my instructor detail URL pattern out of my already baked version. And it's going to be right here. And let me plunk it down right here, and let's talk about how this is going to work. Okay? So the regular expression pattern that we're using is the same up to the slash that comes after instructor. Okay, and then we're going to have digits. Okay, so if you remember your regular expressions, if we say \d, that represents a digit. And so we've got one or more digits is the pattern that we're trying to match. Okay. So for instructor 1, we're going to type in instructor /1/. And for instructor 9, it'd be instructor /9/. And for instructor 5000, it'd be instructor /5000/. And this part of the URL, URL pattern, this is a part of the regular expression pattern, but this allows us to not only identify these kind of URL strings as a request for an instructor detail page, but it allows us to collect up the digits and associate them with a name in the view. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the digits that are between the two slashes, we're going to say 1 or 2 or 3 we're going to have, and we're going to associate them with this ID. In the chapter in Pinkham, they're typically asking for the key to a post or to a comment, and the key to a post is a slug. It's a slug type. So you see the word slug here. Well, more typically, we're looking for the key for whatever this thing is. So what's the key for an instructor? It's an instructor ID. And for me, I'm always one to make my variable names a little more descriptive. So instead of just saying instructor ID, I'm saying this is the ID of the requested instructor. So I call it the requested instructor ID. Okay? So we add that in there. So that's what goes inside the angle brackets. Okay? And that's going to be when we have a match, the digits are going to be extracted there and passed onto the view using the name requested instructor ID. And again, we're going to point to a class-based view called an instructor detail. So we're going to have to create that. And we want a name for this. So we use the same kind of formula that we used in before, course info instructor detail URL pattern. And again, we're not going to use these, but we'll use these when we get to the work associated with chapter 6. So this is not resolving because we don't have an import for it. And also it doesn't exist in views. So right now, let's add it to the import. So let's add instructor detail. Okay, and a comma. And that's going to resolve the lower problem, but not the higher problem. Well, it's going to resolve them both as soon as we're pointing to a proper instructor detail class-based view. All right, so that's going to take care of it. All right, so let's go. We've made that change. So let's go to views. All right, and we're going to be creating an instructor detail class-based view. Okay, and it's going to kind of look like the one that we already have. We could, if we wanted to, we could copy this instructor list view and try to do some surgery on it. But again, what I'm just going to do is I'm going to copy my I'm going to copy the view code out of my already baked version. Okay, and I'm going to explain my way through it. Okay. All right. So first of all, you can see that we've got a couple of calls to methods here that we aren't able to recognize. So that means that we're going to have to do some imports. So again, I'm going to highlight this, and then I'm going to press Alt Enter, and it says I'm going to import that from shortcuts. That's fine. So that's resolved. And render to response, same deal. Okay. And we're going to do Alt Enter on that, and we're going to resolve that. So now the imports are resolved. Okay. So a couple things are going on here. Oh, by the way, if you can see my screen flashing away, okay, this happens to me from time to time. Down here at the bottom, it's saying it's indexing indices. As long as I go to a blank line and click on it, it calms down. Now, I'd say that's probably bad behavior for a software product, but if it happens to you, perhaps my fix will work for you. So what are we doing here? Well, first of all, um, in this class-based view, the method that we have is a get. So within the get, we're going to have all code that's based on get for this view. And again, a get is the HTTP method that gets called. We use a get when you click on a link in a web page. So when we click on a link that says we want to go to the instructor detail view, we're going to come here. And of course, it is going to be a get because we will have clicked on a link. And we get the self because this is an object-oriented method. We get the request because we need the request to get the data out of it. And we get past this requested instructor ID, which was extracted by that URL pattern. So here's how we get it. It is kind of automatically passed by that name to this to the get method in the class-based view. We're using a kind of a shortcut. We're using a shortcut approach to retrieving the instructor here. We're using a call called getObject or 404, and in the text he walks us along through 2 or 3 versions before we get to this, but this is the shortcut version. What's going to happen is either we're going to find the object that we're looking for, we're either going to find the row in the instructor table, or we're going to send back a response that says it's a 404, which is saying that the resource that we're asking for, this instructor, is not found. Okay, so that's the name of the method, getObject or 404. We have to pass it the model class, okay? And then we have to tell it what the search criteria are, what the match criteria are. So instructor ID is the name of one of the fields on the model class, okay? So that's where that name came from. And one of the reasons that I didn't call the value that we extracted from the URL pattern, one of the reasons I didn't just call an instructor ID is I knew I was going to have this line here, and I wanted to say it's instructor ID equals requested instructor ID. And I think that reads more clearly based on just having taken a little bit of care with naming. Okay, now at this point, when we come down through this closing paren on line 23, one of 2 things has happened. We either have the instructor object, and it's in there's a reference to it in the variable instructor, or we've sent back a 404 resource not found response, and we're out of here already. We've sent a response and we've quit. So if we've gotten this far, we have an instructor. What else do we have to get? Well, we have to think about what's on the instructor detail page. Okay, and when you think about the design of the database, and I just want to pull over the logical database design, so I'm going to pause while I get that. Okay, so here I fetched the entity relationship diagram. And these are very helpful when you're doing this detail page design, because what do you want to show on the detail page? Well, if it's if you have an instructor, well, then you probably want to show the fields for the instructor. So you probably want to show the first name, the last name, that. And then you want to say, then you want to have a list of things that the instructor is related to. Well, what are instructors directly related to? Well, they are teaching 0 or more sections. Okay, so for us to do the job, we have to retrieve a sections list that's associated with the instructor. Okay, and that looks good. All right, and let's just go to the models and look at the instructor. Okay, so the instructor's up top here somewhere, I think. No, here's the instructor. And here are the fields. So we have the instructor ID. We use that in order to find the right instructor. And then we have the first name and the last name. But we don't have a pointer for the relationship because it's defined on the other side. Okay, over on sections. So let's come down to section. And we can see that in addition to the fields that a section has for itself, the section ID and the section name, it has a bunch of foreign keys. So there's one for the semester, there's one for the course, and then there's a many-to-many for instructors. So we're going to be using this field instructors in order to retrieve the references to the sections. And in fact, what name are we going to use? Well, we're going to use this related name, sections. So we're going to be able to ask for the sections that are related to this instructor. Okay, well, how does that happen? Let's look. Let's down in the views. Well, okay, so we have the instructor, and now we want the sections. I'd like to call a list of sections a section list. And here's what we do. We use the instructor variable, instructor, and then we take out the field that's in it called sections, and then we just call the method all. Okay? And we get a list of all of the sections for that instructor. And that's all we need. Now I want to emphasize here that because we're taking a model view controller approach, okay? And because the controller is the combination of the Django URLs.py and views.py, the belief is that the controller should retrieve all the data that needs to be retrieved. Okay, so certain people could think, well, let's, in the view here, let's just retrieve the instructor and let's wait till we get down to the template to retrieve the list of sections. And there are people who do that. They just have really broke the model view controller architecture. Okay, so model view controller architecture says that the controller should get the request and interpret the request, and it should retrieve all the data you have to retrieve, and we're going to display it. Then we send it to the view with a capital V in model view controller, and that's our template. So even though we could theoretically do the lookup for this section list in the template, we don't. Okay, so that means here for the instructor, we only have a list of sections that we have to look up. But for instance, when we get to section, we're going to have a bunch of things to look up. We're going to have to look up the semesters. No, the semester, the instructors, the students, and so unlike when we're doing a list view where we do one retrieval from the model, we can do a group of them here in order to get all the data that we need from the model before we pass it on to our template. Okay, so here we've got the instructor, we've got the section list, and now we're going to cause the template to be fired up with a proper context, etc. And that's how we do it here. So here's the name of the template. It's pretty straightforward. Course info instructor detail.htm. Okay, and here's the context. And remember, in this new world that we're using, contexts are not instances of the context class. They're just plain old mom and pop dictionaries. That was an improvement in the recent versions of Django. And so what are we passing? Well, we're passing the instructor and the section list. Okay. Now, what if we, so when we were doing just the instructor list, well, all we had was an instructor list. Okay. Now, generally speaking, we get to the details, we're going to pass the object itself, the instructor, and then a list of the object or list that it relates to. And we're going to fetch them all up here in the view, and we're going to pass them through the context to the template. And the template is all about writing things. Okay? It's not about finding things. We're doing all the finding right here. Okay? So that's the view. All right? And again, could we do things in the same way that we use the instructor list view to clone all the other list views? We're going to use this instructor detail view in order to clone the section detail, and that's the hardest one. And then I'm going to leave you to do the other ones on your own. Okay? But so far we've done everything, but we haven't seen the template. So let's go look at the template. We don't have a template file right yet. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up my template, my already baked one. And I'm going to point out that what I did is I was fairly well inspired by I just took the instructor list template, and I was inspired by some things in the Pinkham chapter, and I came up with it. So I went to templates, and I took instructor list, and I cloned that. So I copied that, and I pasted it, and I said, okay, let's make this instructor detail. All right, and then I asked myself, well, what's going to be different? Well, is it going to extend the base.html? Yeah, I think that makes sense. Okay, what's the title log going to be? Well, it's not going to say instructor list. Okay, we do have the name of the instructor. Okay, so what are we going to do? Well, I always like to have some kind of fixed part of the title. So I'm going to say this is an instructor. So I say instructor hyphen space. Okay, and now I want the name of the instructor. Well, we're going to get this with the template variable, curly curly, right? And we want something from the instructor. Okay, and if you remember from when we did the instructor list, if we want the string representation of the instructor object, we can just use the variable name all by itself. That will implicitly call the string function and get a string representation of the variable. Now, could we reconstruct what we want? Could we ask for instructor last name. Could we say we want instructor last name and then blah blah blah? Could we build it up again? We could, but then if we decide that we're going to represent the names of these objects in a different way, well then we have to change it in more than one place. So I like just having instructor here, so we get the name of the instructor. Okay? And now we have the block content. That looks good. Okay, but again, we've got a little more stuff. So we're going to have an H2. Okay. And I'm going to move that up here. No, I didn't do that too well. So let's move that line up to the top. So we start out with an H2. And here, I just kind of like the instructor name. So you pretty much know that you're on an instructor page. So I don't think we need to have instructor dash. So I'm just going to use the curly braces, again, the double curlies, and I'm going to put instructor, and that's going to get me the string that represents the instructor object. Now, when I was coming up with the design for this next part, I wasn't absolutely sure, and I'm just going to show you what I did, and then you can do it from there. In the book, he takes his content and he puts it into sections. Okay, and for me, there's probably one section that just has the fields from the row. Okay, so I need a title. So I'm just going to use an H3, so it'll be a little smaller than that H2. And the first thing I have is last name. Okay, and then I want to put that somewhere. Now there's a lot of ways you can do that. I'm just going to do a version of this that I've done in other systems. It's not great graphical design, but it'll get the job done. So we just have an H3 that says what the field is, and then we have a paragraph with the value. And we use a template variable, a template tag, double curly, and what are we going to ask for? Well, instructor, and we've got last name. Okay, so that works. Now, you may say to me, you know, Kevin, I'm not sure I want to do that because I've already shown the last name and the first name in the title of the page. And I might say to you, well, you're right. But a lot of times in these database applications, people just want to see what the fields are. Okay? And so I'm going to show them the fields. So I've got the last name. I think it'd be better to put the first name first. It appears first on the definition of the database. And then I clone this. Just copy this and paste it. And put the last name. Oh, the first one has to say first name. First name. And the second one is going to say last name. Okay, so that's pretty close. Not bad. Okay, so in terms of the HTML design, Pinkham likes to put each of these kind of sections in a section. It's pretty good for people with visual impairments because if they're using a screen reader, it's going to make it easier for them to find data. So I'm just going to put the fields up there. And then we're going to have, we're not going to have an instructor list, but we're going to have a section list. So how are we going to do that? Well, again, I want to put it inside of a section element. That's kind of a pretty HTML5 thing to do. So I'm going to take those. I'm going to put that there. And I'm going to make it pretty and indent the unordered list. Okay. And this is not an instructor list. It's a section list. So for sections, the first thing that we need is we need a title. So let's give it an H3. Okay. And say sections. Okay, so we know the sections that they have. And I'm just going to change this around for section in section list, because that's the name that we're passing through in the context. And inside of the link tag, which of course we don't have the href for yet, we're just going to use the name of the variable. That's section. And what we're going to get there is it's going to implicitly call the string method on the section model class, and that's going to give us the representation that we've already designed. Okay, and then we have, in the case that that's empty, that we don't have any sections for the instructor, we don't want to say what we're saying here. Let's say there are currently no sections for this instructor. Okay, and that might not be the most eloquent way to say that, but they're going to know what we mean. Okay, pretty good. So I think we have it, and we took pretty much a clone one thing into the next approach. And let's see, Pinkham seems to like a blank line between the sections. I think that looks kind of pretty. That's how we're going to leave it. Okay, so let's do a save there. Again, I usually use the Command S to save, even though if you simply come off of the changed line, I think it should really save in PyCharm. So we should be able to test. Okay, we have this whole instructor detail done. So let's crank up a test. And Safari can't connect to the server because we broke something. So instead of make you watch me debug this, I'm going to go put you on pause, and I'll come back when I have it all figured out. Okay, I found my way to it. Over here on the console, it says import error, cannot import name instructor list view. So somewhere I'm importing instructor list view, and it's not what it should be saying anymore. So let's go look. Where would I import that? Well, I'd import that into URLs, I think. Instructor detail. So I've got instructor detail. Oh, instructor detail should not have an underscore in it. So that's resolved. Good thing I fixed that. And then let's look at views and see if we have any complaints there. It doesn't look like it. Okay, so let's try again. So I'm just going to go back to my browser. And HTTP 127, and there it is right there. Okay, so let's just try the server. Okay, so not found because we didn't really give it any URL at all. So let's give it /instructor to ask for the instructor list. If we get that, that's coming. And you have to remember these are in alphabetical order. And instructor 1, I think, is me, even though I'm down there in the alphabetical order. So if I want to ask for the detail page for instructor 1, I say instructor 1 slash. And how about that? I blew that up. Okay, so I'm going to pause it again so I find the mistake. And I'll come back and look like, and I found it. Okay, so this one I found in the browser. And right up here in the beginning, it's pretty clear. It says instructor detail HTML source does not exist. So, I can't find the instructor detail page. And why would that be? And when I look over here, look where the instructor detail page is. It's in the wrong spot. Okay, it's up in templates, but it's not under templates course info. So let's just drag it to where it is supposed to be and say, okay. And that looks better. And then let's just come back and refresh this page, and I'm hoping we'll be okay. There we are. Okay, so I don't like to find the errors while you're watching, but I will correct them while you're watching. Okay, so this is my instructor detail page. So even though it's got here, in fact, let's look at what's on the title. Let's create another window so you can see what was on the title was instructor-trainer, Kevin. I like that. That's what I wanted. Okay, and then we go back there. We've got all of our banner and nav stuff. That looks good. And then I've got the title Trainer, Kevin. That's what I want. Then I've got my first name. Then I've got my last name. A lot of people would think this is overkill, but I kind of like it, so I'm just going to put it there. And here's a list of the sections that I'm teaching. Now, this style of detail pages and list pages is very good because you can just zip around it like crazy. So, for instance, we'll come here and we'll go to this section, and when we're on the section, we'll see that it's taught by me, and we can either come back to this page, or we can say that the section's in a certain semester, and we can go to the semester detail page, and we can zip around this in a very flexible surfing kind of a way, and these applications are very pleasing that way. So this is what we want. We have a list of sections. Now, we haven't tested what happens when we have an instructor who doesn't have any sections. So let's just keep asking for different instructors until we find one. 2. So Jane Scholar is teaching one section to 340. And let's come to instructor 3, Bill Zeus. There are currently no sections for this instructor. And this brings me to a couple of things. One is, should we put the instructor ID on here? And I'm going to say that the style that I'm used to for these applications is because the IDs are just integers. And they're not volatile, and we generally are not using these URLs for bookmarks outside of our system. I don't think we want to burden the user for seeing the internals of the key system. So I have not put instructor ID on the list. That's a design decision. Could you do it the other way? Yeah, I think you could do it the other way. These are kind of arbitrary values that I've created as I've added data to the system. If there really was such a thing as an instructor ID or instructor number and we were using that, then I probably would put that on the detail page. The other thing to remember up here is we're just learning about how to put together these web URL architectures. And because HTTP applications are stateless. These APIs are said to be RESTful. And so this is called a REST, capital R, capital E, capital S, capital T API for our app. And this kind of approach that we have where we take the domain name, so we take the domain name and then a slash, and then the name of the resource that we're interested in, and then a slash. And then if we don't have an ID, then we want all of that resource. So if we don't put the ID after instructor, then we get an instructor list. And if we put an ID, well, then we get the instructor that we ask for. And I just want to say, if we ask for one that's not here, instructor 33, we should get a 404 page. So instructor 33 is a resource for this app. And so when you ask for it, you get a not found. Okay, now we might want something that's a little more user-friendly than that, but this is a standard kind of application thing to do. I just want to point out that I have constructed our RESTful API in designing the URLs, and I've really followed the approach that Pinkham has taken, where the names of the resources are singular. So Pinkham has done this in his approach, and I've done it here, instructor. I kind of like it because I do the same thing for the names of the tables and the names of the models. And as a data modeling person, I think it's the instructor table and not the instructors table. I just want to give you the heads up that if you search around the net, you'll find out that probably the majority of people who create these URL schemes for the apps, these RESTful APIs, would use the plural. Okay, and occasionally the people who are really heretical will use a combination of plural and singular. But using the singular, I think it's the right way to go. I like it. This is what I tend to follow. But you might find a person who is using instructors instead of instructor. Now, the beauty of this framework is, let's say you decide to change that. Where do you have to go? Well, you just need to go to the URLs. Okay? You just need to come in here and pop on some S's. Boom, 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 boom. You're done. Okay? So this, one of the sweet things about frameworks in general, and a particularly sweet thing about Django, is that the assumptions with respect to these URL patterns are just in one spot. And that gives you the opportunity to say, revise the API, grow the API, whatever you need to do, but it's not spread out throughout all of your code. Okay, so we've done instructor detail and we've tested it. Now, what do we need to do? Well, we need to do all the other details. So we need, we have instructor list, instructor detail, then we need section detail, course detail, semester detail, student detail. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and show you how I clone my way into section detail, because we're looking up more data in the view and passing more data items in the context, and I just want the opportunity to comment on that. So, okay. So we have, we want to do the section detail. Where would I start? Well, I like to start at the URLs. Okay. And again, so I like to order the URLs. Most people like to order the URLs. We would have the instructor list and then the instructor detail. These things get searched from top to bottom. um, you want to make sure that you search for just instructor before you search for instructor with something after it, because if you uh, well, you do. It's just the way that you want to order these things. So we have all the instructor ones in order, then all the section ones. So we're just going to take this one. Let's take the um, let's take this one here. You know what I like to do? I'll tell you. I like to clone one of the details into one of the details. So I'm going to put it after section list. Okay, and I just want one blank line and put it in there. And of course, it says the wrong thing. So how am I going to change it? Well, I'm going to take the word instructor and change it to section. And instead of requested instructor ID, it's requested section ID. And instead of instructor detail, it's section detail. Now that's not going to resolve here, but we're going to have to go up and we're going to have to add a section detail up here. Sorry. Section detail. Okay, so we should have a red underline here, but not down here. Our problem the last time is we had them in both places. And of course, this is fine, except that the name that we're using for this URL pattern is the wrong thing. So it should be instead of course info section list. Oh, sorry, we're down on the next one. Course info instructor detail, it's section detail. So this cloning is a very important activity when you're working with these frameworks. You wind up creating a lot of parallel things, and being able to do it in a systematic and a careful way can be a really good skill. So, okay, we took care of the URLs, so let's go to views. All right. Let's see how that goes. And so we have a section list. Before that, we have the instructor detail view. So let's just take this instructor detail view and let's just try to clone it into a section detail view. Okay, so it'll go. The list, typically we put these in the same order that we put the URL patterns. So I'm going to get a couple extra blank lines there. See how that goes. Okay. So 2 blanks ahead of this, 2 blanks after. So it's not instructor detail now, it's section detail. And it's not requested instructor ID, it's requested section ID. Okay. The model class is not instructor, it's section with a capital S. Okay. The test is not instructor ID equals requested instructor ID, it's section ID. That's the name of the primary key for this one. So that field's called section ID is equal to requested section ID. And that's going to match because we just got that working. Okay, so that should get the, oh, and again, we're not getting an instructor, we're getting a section. It's hard to remember to get all these little pieces changed in the right way. Okay, so what are we trying to, what lists are we going to get for section? Well, let's bring back our model. The section is attached to a bunch of stuff. Okay. So the section is going to be attached to one semester, one course, a list of instructors, and a list of students. Okay, we'll make sure all those come back. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's look at the model. Okay, if we look at section, it turns out that there are fields on the model for section that get us all those things. If we want to know the semester that it's for, we use the semester field. The course that it's for, we use the course field. If we want to get a list of the instructors, we use the instructors field. To get a list of the students, we use the students field. Okay, so I want to do those in order: semester, course, instructors, students. Okay, well, let's go back to views and see how that's going to go. Okay, so what did we say? Well, let's take this out altogether. Well, let's give ourselves some blank lines. Okay, so here's where we want to put the code. So we said for the section we want to get the semester, and there's only one. Okay, so how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to need a field to hold it, semester. And then we're going to say, we're going to start with the section dot, we're going to take the semester field. It's that easy. Okay, well, what about the course? We need to look that up. Well, course is a good name for the variable to hold it. And we're going to start with the section object, and it has a course field. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. Okay, so how could we get a list of the instructors? Okay, well, first of all, we're going to create the variable to hold it, instructor list equals. Okay, so we're going to start with the section object. Okay, and the section object has a field for instructors. Okay, and then the instructors has a method called all. Okay, so are we saying that we want to get all the instructors? No, we just want all the instructors that are associated with this section. Okay, and how can it find that? Well, it's going to go query that associative table that's in the middle and bring back just the list that we want. So are we done yet? No, we have one more thing. We have instructors and we need students. So we need a student list. So let's call that student list. Okay. And let's say, so we're going to begin with the section object. And it has a students field. And we're just going to ask for all with the all method. And we got it. It really is pretty simple. I mean, you can imagine querying the model in ways that you want to really come up with some unique values. And you might really have to use your noggin to figure out what that is, but not here. I mean, these for this kind of application where we just want to get the detail, it's very straightforward. Okay, so we're going to get rid of that section list because there's no section list on here. Okay, now we're pretty close. We're going to have a different detail template. So let's call this section detail. Okay. Okay, and then what are we going to put in here? Well, let's look at this. So we're going to pass, um, first of all, we're going to pass the section. So let's say the object itself is section. Okay, sorry. It's going to be called section. And the variable that we're passing through the context is section. That's fine. And then the next thing is we're going to have to pass. Here's where I'd like to put a list vertically. Okay, so the first thing in the list is going to be section. Now, what's the next thing? Well, semester. So the next one is a string semester. And this dictionary entry is going to be associated with the value in course. Okay. And the next entry is going to be, I'm sorry, semester is the value in semester. Let's not get too exciting here. And then course, well, we're going to pass the value that's in course. Right? And what's the next thing? Well, it's the instructor list. So the name is instructor list. And colon, we're passing the value from the variable instructor list. And what's the last one? Well, it's going to be a student list. And colon, and that's going to be passed the value from student list. That's it. So that's how we figure that out. So what I like to do with this is something that looks like this. I don't seem to be able to tab this out. I don't know why. Let's put that there. That'll work out okay there. Okay, so we're passing the section, the semester, the course, an instructor list, and a student list. It's really that easy. Okay, and again, because we're doing model view controller, and of course the things that we're working with here, the URL configuration and the view, they make up the controller, particularly the views, the main part. We're going to retrieve all the data right here. Could we have retrieved data in the template? Yeah, we could. It's just a bad form. It's not the way that it's properly done. Okay, the form is just the form. It's not a form. I meant the template. Okay, could we have retrieved these things in the template? You know, the semester, the course, the instructor list, the student list. Yeah, we have enough information to do it because if we have the section object, we could have put that code into the template. It just doesn't belong there. That's the thing to be learned from chapter 5. All right, so that's all done. So what do we have left to do here? Well, we need a proper template. So what I usually like to do is I usually like to clone a detail into a detail. So far the only detail we have is instructor detail. So I'm going to copy that and try to paste it in the right spot this time. Okay, so this is going to be semester detail. Okay, and say okay. All right. And semester detail, well, we're going to want it to be pretty similar. Again, it's let's just work our way through the title. Well, we don't want to say instructor. We want to say semester. We want to use the semester variable because just all by itself, because we want the string method to be called implicitly to get us the right string representation for that model object. And then we come down here and we say, well, this is the semester. Okay. So we want to show, again, the string. No, sorry. We don't want a capital S on that. We want to show the name for the semester again in the H2. And what are the fields for semester? Well, let's see. What do we have? We have for semester, if I look at the model. Come on, model. What are the fields? Well, I don't want to show, not semester, for the section, what are the fields? Well, the ID, I don't really want to show the ID. One could argue for it, but I think that's just a part of the way things are hooked together in the system. So I don't want to distract the user by it. But there's going to be a section name and then all the stuff that we pass. So the only real attribute that it has that's not a foreign key is section name. So let's go to, you know what I did? I called it semester detail. That was a bad idea. So how do I fix that? Well, I want it to be called section detail. So I'm just going to go over and highlight the name of the file in the navigation panel and right click. And I want to say refactor, rename, and I want to call this section detail. Section detail. And I think I'll be okay if I just refactor it. We'll see. So this is called section detail now. That's good. Oh, this is interesting. I was going really wild. Section in the title, not semester. Section right here. Down here, the H2 section. All right. I'm getting weary. I'm sorry about that. So now we're going to go down to the section where I have the kind of attributes, the fields that are on section that are not foreign keys. And that's just going to be the section name. So I'm going to get rid of one of those things. I'm just going to clone this in and say, instead of first name, it'll be section name. Okay. And the variable is going to be section. And its field is going to be name. That easy. Okay. So we're doing okay so far. Now, what all were we passing through? Well, let's just look back to the views. We were passing through, we've got the semester and the course. Okay, I'm going to put those right there too. So let's put them up there on their own. But put them up there with the other kind of single value attributes. Okay, so semester and course. So I'm just going to take this and I'm going to copy it twice. Okay, and the first one looks like my H3's got kind of mucked around. Maybe it would have helped if I put a little kind of blank lines in there. Let's oh, you know, it's interesting. My section name should say section name instead of session name. That's better. Okay, and so now we got this, and give us a blank line after that, and now we've got that. Okay, so what were the two values? Well, semester, okay, semester. And what's the value that we want for that? Well, we just want to use the variable name and have, however we're representing that, we want that to come through. So just say semester, and we'll get the string value that we associate with that object. And then the next one's going to be course, and we're just going to do the same thing. We're going to say course, and then we're just going to, with the template tag here, we're just going to say we want the string representation of the variable course. Okay, so we have all the single values in that first section. So now we're going to have our first list. I'm just going to click back to views. What's our first list? Well, it's an instructor list. So we have an instructor list and a student list. Okay, let's look. So it's not going to be sections. It's going to be instructors. Instructors, not instructions. Okay, and we're just going to clone it. So for instructor and instructor list, okay, I got an autocomplete there. Sometimes when you get the autocomplete though, you wind up with a thing that says instructor list. So you got to be careful taking the autocompletes during cloning. And we want to list the name of the instructor. There we go. That autocomplete worked. And we just want to say there are currently no instructors. This is the other side of the same relationship. There are currently no instructors for this section. That looks pretty good to me. All right, that's good. And then we need another one for students. So I'm just going to take the one I just created and clone the clonee. Okay, should be pretty easy. Okay, so now it's going to be students in the title, and then for student in, student list. Okay, and the name that we want to put inside the tag is from the variable student. We want that string. And then we want to say there are currently no students. And instead of just saying for this section, I'm going to say registered for this section, because that's sort of an application term that makes it a little more meaningful. Okay, so that should be that. So we again, we did the cloning in URLs, we did the cloning in views, and then we cloned and created a template, and it looks like we're ready to go. Have we made any mistakes? Yeah, probably. We're going to find out as we go. So make sure we get a proper save here. And let's try and go down and click on our server. And that looks pretty good. You'll notice that every time that we come out to the 404 page, we'll see a list of the URL the patterns that we're looking for. And you'll notice that after a section, we have this one that's going to the section detail. Okay, so that's pretty good. So that looks good. So let's go up here and let's try to get the section list page again. So section and no number. And there's a list of all the sections. That's good. Okay, and then let's look for section 1. Okay, 1 slash. And it's not working. So it looks like I typed it in right. And it says no sections match the given query. Oh, and you know what? I think I had a section 1 and I deleted it in the database. So there is no section 1. So that's my 404 not found. Okay, let's look for section 2. Did that work? There we go. So it's Infos 340001, a systems analysis class in the spring of 2018. Section name, there's no section name here. So it should be saying 001. That's the section name part. So we're going to have to fix that. Semester, 2018 spring, good. Course, that's the number of the course. That looks good. Instructors, Jane Scholar. Okay, 1 instructor. Students, we've got 2. Now, a couple of mistakes here. Okay, mistake 1: we're not getting any output for a section name. So why don't we fix that? Okay. So let's see what's going wrong. And you know why? The name on the section table is called section name. Section underscore name. Okay? Now, at different parts in the technology, when you have an error, you'll get different kinds of results. But typically in these templates, and this is true in almost all these template technologies, the good thing about templates is you get to put your markup in as you would type it just into a plain old HTML page. I mean, that's the beauty of templates. And then to the extent that you have code, you have to put the codes in special characters. So it's either these double curlies or the curly percents. Okay, and because we have typically a lot more markup lines than code lines, templates are very convenient for the coder, right? So that's good. But typically, these things kind of work like the browser does, where if you give it a name that doesn't point to anything, it doesn't blow up. It just doesn't give you output. Okay? Most of the other things, problems in the view are going to kind of blow up. Problems in the URL, some of them will blow up and some of them are just going to route to the wrong place. But a lot of those things are pretty wired in, and you're either going to get a some kind of error flagged in the code even before you go to run the test, or when you run the test, you're going to get a hard error. But problems with these variables, these template variables, where we're trying to pull things in. Here we ask for a field that isn't even in the model, and it doesn't blow up. It just doesn't give us a proper answer. Okay, it just puts blank in there. And you should be aware of that when you're doing this. So, okay, come off of that so we save. Let's go back and let's refresh, and we should see this come in. And there it is, 001. That's good. Now, 001 is a proper field. Okay. Does it need to be a link? No, because what would it link to? Well, it would link to this thing that we're already on. No need to link to our own page. But the semester and the course, we would like these to be links in the same way that the instructors and the students are. because we would just like to be able to zip around this thing. So what I've done wrong here is not create links. I've just put the data out, but I've not embedded it inside of a link. So let's fix that for semester and course. Okay. So for semester, we're going to want something that looks more like this instructor, right? Okay, it isn't going to be in an unordered list, but it's going to look a lot like that. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to come up here to where I have semester, and I'm just going to plunk that in over top, and I'm going to say, oh, well, that's fine as long as we get semester here. So now we're going to have a link to semester, and then let's just do this for course. We want a link to course. So instead of instructor, we want to link to course. Okay. So let's go back and refresh that page. Well, if we could type, this would be good. So let me fix that. So I've got too many opening brackets on my A. Okay. So save that and come back and refresh yet again. Okay, so we have a link to the semester 2018 spring and a link to the course info 340. And of course, when we get to chapter 6 and we load these guys up, we're going to be able to zip from page to page to page. Okay? Right now, we just stay on the same page because there's nothing inside the href attributes. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So what else are we going to do? I don't see anything else on my list except you got to finish the cloning. So what do we mean by that? Well, let's go back to this. Let's go back to the page. Oh, I'm going to have to get a real page. So let's get a section page again. Let's ask for so we have this section. Let's ask for section 4 this time and see if we have one. So, yeah, so here's section 4. Up here in the nav section, okay, we've done, we have a detail page for instructors and sections. And sections is the hardest one. Why? Because it has the section table or the section model class has the most relationships to other tables or other model classes. Okay, so everything else, the courses, the semesters, and the students are going to be more like the instructors, the instructor detail than like the section detail. Okay, so I'm going to want you to clone courses, semesters, and students. Okay. And you're going to have to remember, I mean, certainly you can do it in whatever order you want, but what I like to do it is I go to the URLs and I put in the detail for course detail. I put that in. I get the URL to work. And then I go to views and I add a class-based view for course detail. And then I clone a detail. You can clone, I think I cloned instructor detail to create course detail because I think the number of elements in them is more similar. Okay? So do the rest of these, and I'm going to put you on hold here. And while you do that, and then I'm just going to show you the rest of my code when I get done. Okay, so I'll see you when you're done. Hello all. Well, I'm back, and if you're back, then you should be at the end of the assignment. You should have done all your cloning such that you now have a list page and a detail page for each of the tables, so each of the model classes. And I just want to show you that I have that too. What I've done is I switched to my already baked version because that was a little faster. And in my already baked version, we're going to go to the, well, we're just going to look at the various parts. So you can see that I have all my templates. Okay. And in the urls.py, I've got the detail for the course, and I've got the detail for the semester, and I've got the detail for the students. I have all those. And then in the views.py, we had just done the section detail, but then I've got course list and then course detail, and then semester list, semester detail, and then student list and student detail. So I did all of them. And then of course I have all of the templates as well. So when I go to the server, okay, I should be able to test all of them. And again, let's just take the last one, the student. So student should give me the student list. Okay, Fenton through Wilson. Okay, and then if I ask for a particular student, like student with ID 3, I get Anna Wilson. Okay, and then if I ask for a student who's not there, like I don't think I have a 33, then I should get a 404 page. And I do. Okay, so that's just where you should be when you finish up all this. I hope it's all worked fine for you, and I'm going to say bye until next time. Bye-bye.